It's been 2 weeks since you last saw the world through the eyes of Agent Thornton. So, the events of the last session were pretty straightforward and took
Yep.
place in one location. But is
Mhm.
there anything you'd like to clarify before we leap back into madness?
Sure. Uh, Kind of the status that we are at as far as who's present, really. We know the location is at my house. Uh, the room we're going to probably start out in is most likely going to be the front living room area, adjoining the dining room and hallway. So Bud and Lou have already left with the device and the captured embodiment of Mickey the Fist,
Right.
which leaves Kyle, as far as I remember, still being present when Professor Spinnaker and Armitage
Yeah.
show up. And I don't remember if there was anybody else that was with them besides those two NPCs, if there was anybody
There
else present in their group.
there are two other people that nobody has burst out. Like Kyle burst out in, surprised recognition at seeing Dr. Henry Armitage from his alma mater, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's someone that he knows. Um, so, um,
Okay.
but who Armitage has with him, or who these other people, if they're here with Spinnaker or if th're here with Armitage, has not been revealed.
Because we kind of like, uh, there was some time passed between Bud and Lou's departure, and some cleanup kind of happened. And during that time, here comes the knock, knock, knock at the front door, and the reveal happens of who the new the new party is. Happens, and then we kind of stop right
Right.
there. Okay, cool. Sounds great.
All right. So let's then return back to November 1931 in Boston. The snow is gone, but the scent of winter remains. There's a feeling of not exactly awkwardness, but that moment where strangers are gathered in a place that's unfamiliar to them with people who are unfamiliar to them, where only one or maybe two faces are recognizable. So Kyle has obviously recognized one of these older gentlemen who have arrived with Dr. Spinnaker. You, of course, are very familiar with Dr. Spinnaker, but know nobody else.
Yeah.
The house has obviously been through some thing this
Yes, sir.
evening. And so people aren't really sure where to look. Immediately behind Dr. Spinnaker is a balding and bespectacled man in a very white beard. Looks to be in his 60s and has, roomy eyes and labored breathing. He's just come up your front walk and then up your stairs and is not out of breath, but probably should sit down. Looks like he's lost weight in the fit of his collar and the shape of his face. You'd say somewhat sunken, stressed. Looks like a professor. The the clothes, the overall demeanor. The other two men are older than you, younger than both him and Spinnaker. And they have that air of grad student in that their attention is focused almost entirely on this balding man.
They appear to kind of hover about him as like they're closely attached to him, more so like if they would I perceive them, if they are grad students, that he is the professor that they had worked with.
Or at least have a great deal of respect for.
So there's
Could
that
be in the
sense
same
of,
department or yeah.
yeah, so there's that sense of like in their visage that there's both care and respect for his current state. Okay. As everybody is kind of coming in, and I see this gentleman and the two other gentlemen in tow, as they're all starting to kind of come into the house, I'm going to yell for Kyle, to get the front room, get some chairs to the front room, out of the dining room. Greet Spinnaker as he comes in. He can see that I am definitely not dressed like I normally am. Behind me, he could probably also see that a couple of the spindles on the banister that goes up to the second story of the home are bent or broken in from something that has recently happened. The carpet, the runner in the front hallway going back to the kitchen is in complete, total disarray and almost knotted up on the floor. I apologize. I say, I'm sorry, Professor. I didn't anticipate you guys arriving so soon. If you wouldn't mind, just give us a few minutes to kind of get some place for everybody to kind of get seated. If you don't mind, could you, start me with introductions, and I'll kind of hold out my hand to one of the grad students, apparent grad students, and say, my name is Alexander Thornton. Welcome to my home.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Thornton. Uh, my name is Richard Whately.
A
And
pleasure to meet you, Mr. Whately.
this is Ezra Smith.
As kids, our mothers told us that if we did what we were told, stayed out of trouble, and looked to good men and women as role models to better ourselves, we could achieve the American dream. It's hard not to wonder now as the drought eats the heart out of the country and the dust delivers black blizzards and poor men beg for food while rich men fall from the sky. Did they know they were lying? Broken families, broken dreams, broken promises, moments of charity, holding off starvation for another day so that suffering can carve deeper marks in the rag-clad children of destitute parents cowering in confusion in the shadows of well-heeled shot callers for the gangsters and politicians with the police taking money from both to keep the peace. Keep your nose clean. Keep it to the grindstone. Keep it out of others' business. The words of our mothers echo down the streets lined with ragged folk with tin cups praying for soup. Can anyone turn this free fall into flight? Is there an answer out there that brings sense to madness? Or do we keep swimming our way toward Asculum?
Both of you. I'm a little unsure as to how many people would have been showing up. So I'm not exactly. I kind of look back. There's probably sweat and a little bit of blood on the undershirt that I'm wearing. The hair on my forearms as I'm kind of gesturing towards the dining room has been removed via the tape. Yeah, I wasn't exactly planning on this early of a reception, so I'll try and
Dr.
make my
Spinnaker's like,
house.
well, if it's easier, we could return to my home.
I kind of looking at the older gentleman, I say that that'd probably be a good idea if we go ahead and just stay here for now.
There's some relief.
And if you wouldn't mind, coming into the living room, I still have, my couch here. If you gentlemen would go ahead and make yourself comfortable, and as Kyle is kind of bringing some chairs out from the dining room area, I kind of look around for the coffee table just in case. As we're kind of setting everything up in the front room, window and sofa, get the coffee table brought in, fireplace against the far wall, a couple of chairs. I'll ask Kyle if he can go ahead and get some coffee started, and then as he's kind of making his way towards through the dining room into the hallway, I'll say, don't go anywhere, be sure to stay here.
Yeah, someone has to keep an eye on a steady flow of. He was trying to think of something pithy to say, but he just gives up. Says, "I'm gonna stay by the fridge."
That'd probably be a good idea.
So if you need any beverages, just call. I'll take care of it.
Thanks, Kyle. And go back to the front room, kind of make sure that they're all getting a chance to get seated, try and finish the introductions, and then realizing the state that I'm still in, say, gentlemen, I apologize. If you would give me just a few moments to go upstairs and kind of change out of my shirt, I'll be right back. And then hightail it upstairs.
Kyle steps in here because he knows Dr. Armitage, and you can hear easy, comfortable small talk. As you make your exit. And, so when you return, there's enough chairs for everybody. The coffee table has been found. Coffee cups and teacups and creamer and sugar have been arranged in a functional masculine way.
Please pardon my bachelor hospitality.
And the usual pleasantries are bandied about. It's a lovely home. It has great bones. You know, and,
It was well worth the purchase, and given its proximity to campus, it's been invaluable.
well, Spinnaker breaks the ice. It's not really a social call, is it? Per your request, Alex, I asked Dr. Armitage and a few others to comment on your questions and the story that you told. And he's looking in the direction of the kitchen, and where Kyle has retreated with a questioning look on his face.
There'll be more to add to the story, given what's happened today and new information that's come to light. And it would probably be to all of our benefits if Kyle was present. So I'll yell for Kyle. I say he is involved in this.
Oh,
Something
we
that
can speak freely.
we we should speak freely. I know that
Everyone visibly relaxes.
given the events of today, it is apparent to me that I am, and it, kind of saying this as Kyle comes into the room, surrounded by assistants, unbeknownst to myself. And it is a little bit disturbing in of itself that this has happened. It kind of makes me question my ability to get to the bottom of things, that I have overlooked details which should have been red flags, but may have just been convenient circumstances, or presented to me as convenient circumstances. Kind of looking at Kyle and thinking about the conversation that we had just earlier about kind of the beginnings of my feelings about Xavier, and the comment that I made about sociopaths and psychopaths.
Well, at the description of this man, this Morgan, that you presented me with, and the description of the paraphernalia that he was using, Dr. Armitage wanted to come and ask you some questions, and I thought that would be the most efficient way to handle it. Richard Waitley is a student of our state's kind of unfortunate relationship with witchcraft and other occult behaviors. And Mr. Smith is, well, he's quite a dilettante. And Smith is kind of like, oh yes, I am. Kind of looks just, yes. I started out in architecture, which led me to a deep love of history, which is where Dick, he calls Richard Waitley Dick, where Dick and I kind of found some common ground, but mostly these days I'm involved with anthropological studies about herd-like behavior in, well, people.
It's interesting that you mentioned herd-like behavior, because there's been some recent developments in that front here in Boston. It's kind of one of the things that seems to be a project of the Morgan Co. They've managed to somehow present themselves as an organization which wants to turn things around, and is doing so, and has collectively managed to bring together many unfortunates here in Boston, in an area that was, up until recently, gang controlled, for lack of a better way of putting it.
There have been advertisements and flyers circulated that some of my friends have sent me. Are you aware of an organization called People and Future?
No, I haven't seen anything like that recently, but kind of giving Kyle a sidelong, a little eye out of the corner look.
He nods. They've been advertising and offering jobs and food and room and board and that kind of thing outside of a lot of the speakeasies that I've been watching.
Is there any connection with the Morgan Co? Are they, since we've seen their financial records that we can gather publicly, is this one of their charitable organizations that they work through?
There are definitely large donations. I didn't put it together to PF fund,
Okay. Can
but I do know that when they do, they've got a truck, right? They give speeches, and over the last couple of weeks, they've gone from handwritten signs to printed signs, and more like a political rally kind of thing, and they recruit people and load them up into a truck, and they take them off in the general direction of South Boston. So,
well, this is one of the areas which, a lot of that reconstruction has gone on. So it makes sense. A lot of the work that I've seen or did see was not exactly, kind of looking at Smith was the architecture student. Looking at Smith, I say it's not, you know, advanced labor. They're more or less manual, simple repairs, maintenance, bringing things up to a livable standard. Uh, Beyond that, I don't know how much they could possibly achieve with people at that education level. A lot of the unemployed that they're rounding up appear to be people who are just workers, given what's going on in the economy. It's been difficult for them at the best. Those of us that have money are still finding it very easy to live above what's going on.
well, where Dick and I got interested is that we heard that there were claims of it not just being like a workers' union or not so much political as, in a sense, moral, but they're making strange claims. I heard that clean living, having a job, contributing to the community, and that sort of thing, can allow for. I'm just going to come out and say it. People are saying that they're healing the sick. And I don't just mean, like chicken soup and warm blankets and people getting better. What I heard was the blind seeing, the deaf hearing, the lame walking, that kind of thing. Like real religious revival stuff, but without the normal trappings of religious activity.
Given what I've seen so far, that does not sound far-fetched to me. So today, to give you an understanding of why, looking at Kyle, this house was in such disarray, I've managed to remove a piece from the board, as you would say in a game of chess, that has been troublesome, both in our community in Boston as a member of a gang family, and quite possibly with Morgan. Today, I had my second encounter with a gentleman who we colloquially all call Miggy the Fist, who
Oh, he's often in the papers.
he was often in the papers. Hopefully, today will mark the last day that his name will be seen or his picture seen in the papers.
Now,
We had
Hermitage has been holding his coffee cup and he's just been staring at you the whole time with that look of evaluation or assessment the whole time. Hasn't said a word.
but yeah, and seeing this, knowing that as someone who can understand the value of free information, and his intense scrutiny on me, I begin to just speak plainly. We had basically set a trap with me as the bait. it had become very apparent that for some reason Mickey had interest in my family, myself, beyond me as just a Treasury agent. He was able to somehow comport himself into my home without using the door, without using the window, appearing from thin air and attack me. Now, the trap was provided by the Morgan Co., a device which kind of defies my ability to describe it, other than it seemed to be like a tripod with a somewhat geometric shape at its apex. It required me to provide it with blood to somehow be connected to it so that I could use the trap to contain whatever was inside Mickey for later disposal. And this isn't the first time I had seen Mickey have the ability to pass through a solid object. He had taken some family members hostage at their diner, where I had thought I was just showing up for a late lunch with a coworker. I had fired several times into his chest, but he had still managed at the last minute to pass through a wall and evade capture.
Armitage at this leans forward. Did this individual... This is the O'Shaughnessy man, isn't it?
Yes, this is the O'Shaughnessy, aka Mickey the Fist.
Did this individual have an extended animate tongue?
Kind of reaching up and pulling down, unbuttoning the top, opening the top of my shirt, showing the wound, what is left from it still healing, at my neck. So that is probably the easiest and best way to put it. Animate is a very light description of it. Horrific would probably be more apt.
So there are two expressions warring on his face. It's a little difficult then to tell what exactly he's feeling, but at least one of these feelings is fear. Did he or someone close to him have access to in a sense an old diary?
That is a distinct possibility. I kind of look at Kyle and say, could you get the bag from underneath the kitchen sink? Recently in Boston, there has been some thefts. Some books were stolen. And this is
really
how I was
forward.
This is how I was brought into this whole mess. A gym friend of mine had expressed some distress about what was going on with him, his employment and work. And through that conversation, I discovered that he may have been involved in double columning some books and making copies for a local antique dealership. If I recall the name correctly, this should be the Gavigan family. These books were...
They react very strongly to that.
I assume that has some importance for you.
Waitley leans forward. Well, Do you know the title of these books?
There was mention of something about vermis, a librum.
Yes, 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 yes. Is what I told. Yes. Okay. Some books were stolen from a very disreputable, embarrassing relation of mine. And Arm- Armitage, he's not laughing, but he's not laughing. But there's as much horror in it as there is humor. It's like the emotion has to escape somehow, and it comes out as an old man's harumph. Is it a cough? Is it a laugh? It's hard to tell, right? So this disreputable relation of mine, and harumph. It could never be proven. Could never be proven. But two men from Boston, one Carl Stanford and one Edward Gavigan, strongly believed in the family that some prized tome, this personal account, a personal history, almost a diary, but also a manifesto of a crusader knight who called himself a sorcerer, who was obsessed with raising and communicating with the dead and prolonging his life forever. He sought immortality. And this book, in English it would be the Mysteries of the Worm. This book was the record of his search for eternal life and the foul tools that he collected on that search.
So as Kyle's coming back into the room, I take the bag from his hand and kind of stand up and walk towards the coffee table, opening the bag up and say, reach into the bag, grab a hold of the effigy and say, would something like this be such an item? And I put the small clay effigy down on the table and then put the bag on the
Armitage
floor.
would like to get as far away from it as possible, right? There's a visible physical reaction, and he starts fumbling in his pocket, and you can hear the tin clatter of like a pillbox.
Looking at the two grad students and the older balded bearded man
Is Armitage.
is Armitage, gauging the two grad students, Waitley and Smith's reaction. Do they seem as viscerally repelled by this?
Just curious. Just curious.
So I don't know where this came from or how it came into my friend's possession, but this is really when the investigation had really started to take a turn for the bizarre. And I still standing. I move far enough so that I can take in Kyle and everybody as they're kind of standing there.
Armitage is taking a pill, putting it under his tongue.
See, I don't know how or why I was drawn into this, other than I was following up on some leads on what I thought was a completely mundane investigation involving, corrupt business practices, possible tax invasion, smuggling of whatever illicit goods might have been going on. I say, you're welcome to open and take everything out of the case to see what I've managed to find so far.
That figure, you must break it.
How does Kyle Kyle react? I'm hearing Armitage, I'm assuming, is one saying this, but I am kind of keeping my right eye on Kyle in my peripheral vision because I know the discussion that was had earlier about handing it over. It's a weapon. I want to see his reaction to what Armitage is saying so I can catalog that.
Roll percentile.
That is a 21.
Kyle's primary reaction is curiosity about your reaction.
I say, I'm not the only one in this room that has somehow been drawn into this cabal. And I look at Kyle.
Me too.
I say, I have been what has been referred to as a knight. And I undo the shirt where I don't have the undershirt on anymore. And I open it up to look for the tattoo. I open the left breast knowing that that is where it has been kind of residing previously to see if that is where it's at.
That is where it's at.
Leaning over, I pull the tarot card out of the Gladstone bag and place it on the table where its image is no longer present and say, this is how I was initiated, for lack of a better way to put this, into this cabal. I received this card on one of the most unusual coincidences I could ever imagine. And from then on, I have kind of been acting in this capacity that I am working against what is some apparent evil. Looking at Armitage, I point at the idol and say, I was told that this is a weapon that can be used in some way, shape, or form. You are telling me to destroy this. I have somehow been drawn into, looking at Kyle, something larger than myself. And as a man trying to rationalize what he has seen and experienced over the past few days, have a very hard time coming to terms with the idea of destroying a weapon that I might use to defend myself against enemies, which can, and I raise my hands for the only way I can put this, appear out of thin air in my home. I was told the tattoo was the only way in which I, and holding my hand out to Kyle, my page, or my other squire. I kind of smiling, I said, I didn't realize our relationship had already grown that fast. So Lou and Bud are only pages, but you,
Squire.
I look at Armitage and the other two, Smith and Whately, to kind of gauge, if they're understanding the structure of what I'm saying, how I and he are fitting into what they are saying.
The almost banter, the post-stress banter between Kyle and you is much more acceptable to the two younger, older than you men.
Mm-hmm.
To Armitage, everything has been distasteful. And to Spinnaker, who's been quiet through this whole thing, he's just been observing everyone. There's that look of that normal look of concern, of interest. He's watching mostly you, and assessing. He's remembering maybe the night before. So Armitage asserts himself, right? The medication maybe taking hold, or passion, or something else. It's not that he has a poker face. It's just that what flits across his face is never singular. It is a weapon, but it is a, if it is what I believe it is, if it is drawn from the writings of Ludwig Prien, then it is a prison for a tormented soul driven to madness and willing servitude, transformed from man into unseen monster, capable of despicable acts, cannot be controlled. It is like forest fire or explosion. It can be unleashed and it can be drawn back into its prison. It is a cruelty. The spirit trapped inside should be allowed its freedom. And it is dangerous to the user and to anyone against whom it is unleashed.
I'm listening intently to what he's telling me as I'm kind of kneeling down, reaching into the Gladstone bag and pulling out some of the files and putting them on the table. When he mentions, unspeakable acts, the destruction it can cause, I pull out the article on the massacre. This is what you mean, that it's indiscriminate.
Yes. And powerful.
As someone who had seen the aftermath, I could definitely agree that it is powerful and it is very indiscriminate. I do have two questions for you. One having to do with something I had seen at this location. That is, behind a dresser, there was a foot in a shoe, which was part of the wall. This passing of
They're all looking at
physical material, I kind of like, gesturing at the wall of my home. It appears to be part of the wall. How does this happen is one question. I had seen that this is what Mickey had done, but it was apparent that something or someone was partially prevented from doing it. And the other is, if I agree with you, and from your description, I morally, I do agree with you that if this is a trapped and tortured soul, if I do destroy it, how can I, as just a man, protect myself against someone or something who may seek to unleash such a thing against me? As far as I know, this whole conversation, and I look at Kyle, this whole conversation is being heard. This, or the portent or the idea that this conversation would occur is somehow or will be known to Xavier Morgan, who I am, looking at Kyle still, uncertain of his intention, uncertain of his belief and the range of his power.
This is the tattooed man.
Yes. The one who gave me the card, the one who, I could only say, put this mark on me, thrust me into this position.
Do you have a memory of the markings on his face?
Reaching into the Gladstone bag, I pull out the ubiquitous notepad and a pencil and say, I'm no artist, but I will try, and I try to illustrate some of what I remember from giving the police description, or the debriefing description that I gave to Bill, and the artist in that.
Okay.
I'll also try and make some of the markings that I had seen on his compatriots. There were two of them, as I explained.
So, dexterity for the sketching, intelligence for the memory,
Jeez.
right? The lower of these is the cap.
Yeah, okay.
Now, these are times 5, of course.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah.
So to put this in, to make it as clear as possible, should you succeed in the dexterity, of course, you can draw what you remember. Should you fail in the intelligence, there are things you don't remember.
Mhm.
Should you succeed in both, you are able to produce an accurate enough selection.
Okay. So with the lower of the
It's-
two,
It's one roll.
one
In
roll.
order to succeed in both, you have to roll under the lowest,
Okay. So dexterity of 9 times 5 would be 45,
usually.
according to the new math. It's very rough. Some of what I may be attempting to draw is not of the best detail. It's a 48. It just skims over the surface of my ability to recall and portray it on the page, as any untrained artist
Yeah.
might do.
So the men look on. Prin. Armitage is, glasses down, glasses up, glasses out a little bit, and looking. They're nodding each other.
Well, I see by my inept art skills that this hasn't thwarted any kind of recognition that you may or may not have. You recognize something here out of the details I have scratched.
They don't resemble in any way mundane occult symbols, offers Whately, and that one, although it's really not accurate if it looks like anything. Finally, Smith comes forward and says, "If you know, don't we have to say?" Armitage says, "Do not trust this man. He has allied himself with powers." He's clearly thinking about how to say what he wants to say. With powers that can defy distance, can defy dimension, possibly even time.
Taking a deep breath and kind of standing up, when he talks about how I have aligned myself. Very straight, serious look on my face, say, it is no overt choice of my own that I am in this situation.
Oh,
so to say that I am aligned, Professor, may be overstepping your boundary with me. This choice was made for me, not by me. And as a man trapped in such a position, I am looking to find a way out of it. And I pointedly look at Kyle. I don't know about you, Kyle, but I am still very uncomfortable. My comments about sociopathy and psychopathy that I made earlier about Xavier still stand. I don't truly believe that his intentions are real.
For me, I bought into the idea that see my I didn't have time to tell you about my report. All through his territory, every speakeasy, every brothel, every gambling den, all the vices. They've all been converted into housing, workspaces, legitimate workspaces.
No silver lining doesn't come without its cloud, Kyle. There's something behind what's happening, whether that plan is being covered up with the guise of moral uprightness or well-being or social uplift, which right now, given the mental state of many of the people out there, would be subject to believing in it. And raising my hands kind of in front of my body as I turn towards Kyle, say, this is no different than the junkie who is given his first lick for free. If it's good for them and they believe it, then they will keep taking it. But I will have to know where you will stand.
Was it different for you? I mean, it was a conversation and then a card and then
And I point at him and say, a conversation, yes, and a card, yes, but with no revealing of intent, no discussion of true voluntary participation. His goals appear to align with my department. You know what we do. We track down criminals. It appears very convenient for him that Mickey the Fist, and looking at Armitage and Smith and Whately, happens to conveniently be an obstacle in his path. And I and you, as officers of the Treasury, are convenient tools to put in opposition to that, to clear the way, as it were, for whatever his real intentions are.
Armitage inserts himself into the conversation. His real intentions? You can see it modeled in his cult. The breaking down of barriers. He is a worshiper, and he's pointing at that one symbol that kind of looks like something that they recognize.
Mm-hmm.
He is a worshiper of the render of veils.
My look is slightly blank as I hear something that I don't recognize. I've never heard, being brought up religious or Catholic in Boston. My immediately leaps to something satanic.
Which
So,
means,
he can see that lack of understanding on my face.
which means that for this man, if he has made contact with his alien patron, that distance has no meaning. The future is open to him, as is the past. And should he succeed in bringing his patron to our plane, we cease to exist in any meaningful way.
my, the look of still trying to believe and understand what he is saying is becoming present on my face as my eyes are kind of like trying to focus on the coffee table, the effigy, the bag, the paper trail that I've collected.
Everything that you know is real and in reference to real actions, and this stranger has confirmed. And after everything else, it's just that little bit too much.
Sinking down to my knees and kind of my hands are just on the sides of the Gladstone bags. I'm staring down into its blackness, trying to pull together my thoughts, racing through my head. How am I going to defend myself if I make myself defenseless by destroying a weapon that I have in my possession? The idea that someone who I had once thought to be a fellow coworker and friend is now in the same fix as me. What other bodies have I left in my wake begins to take hold as I break out in a cold sweat and tears begin to form and my eyes start to water.
So Spinnaker makes a motion as like to get up out of his chair, but Armitage is closer, not faster. And his clammy hand, which maybe once was fleshy or muscular, but now you can feel the bones burning hotly inside it, you know. He grips your arm. The fight cannot change you. He's pointing at the figurine. What you take, you know this, what you take into your hand, you take into your heart and mind. The words you speak shape the world you see. This night is it a servant of darkness? I don't know. Is it in control of you? I don't know. But if you use weapons like this, I know ways to make your home safer. Never safe. I know ways to make the invisible visible. And I promise you now I will search for ways to bar the gate to the render of veils.
You're still staring into the bag. That kind of, when you stare at some blackness for too long, the lights and specks of color that may enter into it, still kind of holding me as, I'm looking to the side to try and break, looking into that blackness, looking at Kyle's feet. Xavier said that the white knight always moves first. And my only reply that I could make to him was that a black knight can break the rules. looking at Armitage, his hand on my forearm. If I have to move from one cabal to another to protect myself to something that would be more aligned with my moral vision, then I would rather do so. I am not comfortable on this horse that he has placed me. And I look at Kyle. If you are my squire, then I will either have to dismiss you from my service, or I look down at his feet.
He just holds out his hand.
I'll reach out to shake it.
If what has bound us, he's just rubbing his shirt, produces things like Mickey, then any act of goodwill is just distraction.
Deception.
It's the faith
Okay.
healer in the revival tent.
Kind of roll back and sit down on my haunch with, feet on the floor, knees raised, to try and steady myself as I'm still kind of reeling. Is it just really as simple as breaking it? There's no special thing that needs to be done.
No, this is simplicity itself. Smash it, cut it, hammer it, stomp on it. Break the stone, we free the spirit.
I'll pick it up off the table, like you would hold a pencil, and try in that very simple way to break the rules.
Strength.
Okay. For being clay, this is awfully a lot stronger than it looks. I look up at Kyle. Fetch a hammer.
Banging, and comes back with the hammer and hands it over.
Smash it with the hammer, because either it has a grip on me, or I am just too weak to break this because it's made of stronger material by hand. So I'll place it on the floor and smash it.
It shatters into irregular fragments. And the temperature drops. No wind, no darkness. But the warmth of the house is arctic. Armitage
Still
waves
wearing
back.
a nice button down. Yeah. The hammer smashed. Immediately, into that protect the core, protect your chest, get as warm as I possibly can, hand on the back of my neck as I can feel the goose flesh rippling up and down. Looking around at the rest of them in the room, my mouth is just agape. Hammer in right hand, left hand, trying to get into shape to get warm again. Start a fire is all I can say.
In a moment. Just a flash. Just a forgotten vignette of someone else's memory. There's the thankfulness of a little girl.
mean, still reeling from the experience, the unbidden watering of the eyes still continues as I'm cannot and still cannot come to terms with what is happening. It still seems very surreal, very unreal.
Spinnaker is looking around, obviously affected, right? Almost subconsciously feeling his own pulse. Kyle has obeyed the order. He's going to the fireplace, right? Waitley and Smith are looking at each other, right? Clearly friends. There's no way to deny, like, did you feel something? Did you hear something? Is too cold, too fast. And you might not be the only person in the room who felt the release of what was trapped. Armitage is again fumbling in his pocket for pills, but his thumb is in the pocket, but his fingers are on the outside, and he's got a pained expression on his face.
Kind of as I'm looking up and kind of seeing that he could be in trouble, I'll say, Waitley, Smith, check on the professor, please.
And Smith leans in, helps medicate Armitage.
I collapse onto my side on the floor. I mean, the experience is just collectively now coming to a head. I hear hoofbeats, unbidden. I can still feel my heart pounding. And until I can get warm, until some warmth is brought back into this room, I have to stay where I am.
It takes Kyle an eternity to get the fire going. His hands shaking from cold, from fear, both. But he's weeping unabashedly. The fire quickly dispels the cold.
Warming up, trying to get back to my feet.
Spinnaker has moved off, come back with blankets and comforters from somewhere, wrapping them around anyone who wants them. Once the fire is lit, Kyle brings in coffee. Ezra said there's one more thing.
My eyes roll as my head tilts back.
I found plans in the Miskatonic library. Plans for the excavation and construction of a large temple.
Where? Here in Boston?
In Boston, yes. Now, the plans that I found were in other files. I was looking at the construction of church buildings, and I was going through different blueprints and Then he stops himself because he's warming to his favorite subject. They weren't. They were misfiled. They were in the wrong place. So I don't know where this temple was made, but the iconography is something I have been able to pin down. And it was used in Salem days, and more recently was reused by a fraternal organization here in Boston called the Hermetic Order of the Silver Twilight.
So this is another cabal.
Or the same cabal. Now, I did some quick searches in the stacks, and this fraternal organization no longer exists. There was a scandal a number of years ago, and the Gavigans that we mentioned before were involved, and the Call family, and
Calls.
yeah, Call,
What is it?
Call, and Stanford, and that means the O'Shaughnessy's are related by marriage.
To the Stanfords or the Call family?
To the Call family. Some doctor.
I sift through the paperwork and look for the article. A
Dr.
doctor
Edward Call.
Call.
Whose office you were most recently in
That's where
because
I
of the
heard.
mob massacre.
Yeah.
Dr. Edward Call found listed among the deceased, his remains positively identified. If Dr. Armitage can indeed find a way to block or interfere with any attempt by the cult to summon the render of veils, it would need to be in their temple.
Given its size, if you can relate that, we might be able to determine a possible location due to
Within a natural cavern. It's underground and immense.
then there would still need to be some form of physical coordination. Materials have to be purchased, whether that's above board or below board.
But it was built almost 200 years ago.
Hmm.
If they indeed built it.
If it's large, or the cavern that it has to exist in is large, I mean, Maine and most of the upper part of these states are all riddled with naturally occurring caverns.
Yes.
Now, whether all of those are marked by survey is questionable. Records could get lost, misfiled as same way you found the records of the temple.
Right.
Looking over at Kyle, is there anything we might be able to find in the records that we have from our investigation into the Morgan Company, as far as maybe within the last 2 months of transportation and movement, work outside the city? Maybe if this cave is going to be close to Boston, it can't really be within the city limits. If it was within the city limits, something would
Right,
have reached the cavern, sewer.
That way the sewer works. Yeah.
So if it's already been existing and they needed to update its usage, there would have been some movement that we might be able to find.
One article I found talked about a farm, but it didn't say where the farm was. It just called it the Scott Farm. Like
Like
the article
family
itself, yeah, the article itself seemed to have been heavily censored.
How
So
old?
wherever the Scott Farm is, but the article mentioned that there were reports of caverns beneath the farm, but the investigators were never able to locate them. Does this mean that there's no cavern, there's no cave, there's no connection to your Hermetic Order of the Silver Twilight here in Boston, or does it mean that they just didn't find them?
How old is this article?
Oh, 20. I don't have it with me, but 27,
You can just give me
26, 1926, 20.
So basically what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to make a coordinated investigation to try and find through geologic survey and agricultural records, farms, family names, Scott, or
Yeah,
names.
I can keep doing a search for the Scott Farm. Yes.
This probably couldn't be any more, maybe, would you say 30 or 40 miles beyond city limits? Could we extend the search up to 50 miles outside the city limits?
It gets harder because that's different county offices, and it's a
Yeah.
lot of travel and a lot of fees. And
But we can combine that kind of search with geological data. The highest density or recorded density of cavern formations within this region could probably point us in a good direction. So it might be able to narrow down the distance and the amount of searching we need to do.
I agree. I don't know if it's a good point, but I'll raise it. I would think that if this temple I'm describing had been built, that a geological survey that went into the caves could not help but report it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, the person who found it is, in on the.
Oh, there's no denying that there could be an inside cover up, but the fact would still remain that even if part of a cavern system would be disappeared from a survey, that the existence of the system itself couldn't go without notice. not all, I don't know if you've ever been on a spelunking tour, but not all cavern spurs are available for spelunking to the public. In fact, it's highly frowned upon. It's very dangerous. So something like that would be easy to probably turn something into a cover up, making it known that a certain part of a cavern system or a cavern system in general is dangerous and not recommended for exploration. But at least it gives us a target to kind of shoot for. The cavern has to exist somewhere, and a cavern can't exist without access to the surface.
My thinking exactly. At this point, Spinnaker says, I think we need to take Dr. Armitage back to my home so he can rest. And Alex, I think you need rest as well.
Yeah. Again, kind of sitting down on the floor, there's no doubt about that. It feels like I haven't really slept more than a few hours in the past week or so.
Well, I want to give you something so you will sleep.
Of course, I'll trust you.
Is there a room for this other young man to stay? I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. God.
Oh yes, it is 2 bedrooms upstairs. Yes, there's a small half bedroom, but
So the students, Dr. Armitage and Spinnaker, make the motions of awkwardly leaving.
yeah. As we're kind of like, as we're making our way towards the door, and Spinnaker is kind of gathering himself together. I do make a point to approach Smith and Whately and say, if you need to get in contact with me, and I scratch out the phone number of the house, on the back of one of my business cards for the accounting firm.
Okay. And they respond in kind with the switchboard connection for their department.
Okay.
Pleasure to meet you. Lots of handshaking.
Yep.
And,
Definitely.
Armitage does not look well.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of watching his back recede. I can't imagine how a man of his age is still driven to do this, and kind of trying to picture the understanding of what he may know.
And as Spinnaker's car turns around, his headlights playing across the trees and down the street before moving at a sedate pace down the road, the lights flash across the large, burly, dark-coated figure of Officer Malone and his cigarette. We'll close the session for this evening.
One more thing.
And not only will we close the session, this, I think, is a very natural break in your investigation for us to take a look at recuperation and experience.
Sure. Before we do recuperation, do you want to go ahead and relate the sand loss from today's experience?
There's 1 point.
Okay.
So, but when we look at it in the grand scheme of the number of points lost and the amount of time that 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 we've represented in play. It's pretty significant. One
yeah.
more point. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. So I mean, as it stands right now, the sand sits at 34. Magic points stand at 6, even though that's not something, typically that was what I got drained of.
Right.
And hit point wise, I've only still managed to recover about halfway.
Yeah.
So I stand
Not
at 8
well.
there. No, all right. It's been punishing. Day after day at the Treasury office has been punished.
Why did I take this job?
Why did I decide
All right.
to not go into psychology?
Okay. We did the recovery of some vital points of sanity at the defeat of Mickey already in the previous session.
Yes.
But finding, in a sense, allies who demonstrate understanding of your problem, belief in the veracity of your claims, and a willingness to participate, and the genuine loyalty of Kyle. This is kind of an end of investigation reward of 3 points of sanity.
Okay. So that will push us back to 37. Nice.
Now, depending on how active you are, and that's in your hands, right? There's been no time for healing since the last time we talked about healing. So
Yeah.
we'll just keep track of the timeline and you'll recover or not.
Yeah. I mean,
that's on you.
no, it's definitely the recovery of the magic points. Is
That's
that
a
going to
function of
be
time and rest? Yeah.
the function of time and rest? So very much treated like a hit point recovery in a sense, but
Yeah.
maybe on a different scale. Okay.
Right.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so let's take a look at experience checks. Now, the way I'm doing it is that because for the sake of mood and atmosphere, there are a lot of rolls which have been waived.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been using a skill in that condition where it gets waived a lot and you are successful, I'm open to it being an experience check. Things that you actually rolled and failed or succeeded can also be checked. So pretty normal.
Of the actual skills that I've been tracking and have my check marks next to that I know I had made rolls for would be fist, of course, for the boxing, slight amount of grappling that took place most recently. Psychology was used in a few spaces. I can think of, that I actually had made a roll for myself.
Right.
Handgun, of course, was also used. Persuade. I did not literally make any credit rating rolls. So
yeah,
out of the
I think
skills
that was just really easy.
Yeah. Just kind of was gone. Out of other skills, I don't have anything else marked yet.
Okay. So let's start in then with psychology.
All right.
Roll to fail. I dare you. I double dare you.
I mean,
That's
So
it's got a good
60%,
chance of failing.
it's decent. I'm at a 60%. That's a 72.
Woo! Roll
So
a
that
d10.
one, 2. Yay.
Okay.
All right, so uncheck that.
Yeah.
Persuade.
Okay.
No, didn't learn much from my ability to convince people there.
What was actually happening was that it was your credit rating that was doing
Yeah,
the work.
my astronomical credit rating was doing the talking.
Yeah.
Let's see, going over to the other column, didn't use my accounting for anything. Dodge was, I know, another skill that had gotten used. That's going to be very difficult for me to get up anyway.
Yeah, try.
No, 77, just under
The agonizing proximity
yes.
of yes.
It's like when you get to roll 2d12 for your damage and you only roll 2 points.
Yeah. I like the inversion, like in the game it's like I got 78% chance and I rolled a 77. It's like that's awesome, but in this moment it's the
Yeah, it's
reverse.
the one time you don't want it to happen.
All right, and fist.
Fist. That's going to be another one that's going to be hard to raise. Yep, 15. I didn't learn much from my experience with fighting Mickey the Fist other than I really need to work on my grappling.
Yeah, you were well prepared for fighting Mickey, I
For a
guess, if you guys
stand-up
would.
fight. But
Grapple.
totally lucky that my rebound punch from a prone position managed to get something on him. 87, that's definitely, yeah.
Cool. Roll a d10.
So I will get out of the base range by 1 point. Yes. Go
Keeping
from
it
a
real.
25 to a 26. What I learned was that I've got a lot to learn.
Well, that's like half the battle.
Yes. Okay, so firearms.
Last one was firearms. Yes.
Yeah. Might have a decent chance here. 53, no. Other than that, I think that was it. Yeah, grapple, boxing, firearms.
That's a reasonable spread of things to try and improve. A couple of days of running around Boston.
Well, and really, I'm not. I don't know. It's. I mean, I'm not going out of my way to try and exercise the skills either, right? I mean, there are certain skills that I do place emphasis on just because of the character.
Right.
The psychology is one. Of course, the boxing is the thing I can fall back on if I get into trouble. But I haven't really put the character has not gone into a lot of positions where spot hidden, listen, this, skills that I do have marked, law, where I haven't gone beyond what the character knows how to do, or I haven't pushed it to the envelope. Like even the spot hidden is 45, but I haven't really been in a location where something was concealed very well, where it called for a roll.
Right. Yep. All right. So, has anything, if we look at this investigation in the classical sense, right, that this was an adventure, this was an investigation, do you have a sense of what happened?
Yeah. From what Alex, would probably surmise over the next few hours and until the next day is, Morgan is probably the perpetrator of the theft, would be one of the things that he might come to a conclusion of, given what Armitage said about the journal, the knowledge contained in the journal, what he believes to be Morgan's intentions and his alignment. as he puts it, that unbeknownst to me, somehow Steve may have stumbled upon the theft that may most likely would have been why he was killed, or he may have been drawn into this cult. Why he was given the effigy still would remain a mystery to me, unless he happened upon it, to know that he had in his possession something like that. Now, whether he knew its capability or not, it still remains unknown, because it never really got that far. That the territorial war between Morgan and the O'Shaughnessy's now seems to be swayed very heavily in Morgan's favor, that he is pretty much going to be pushing them out of where he wants to set up his operation, and will probably be very capable in keeping them out. Now, how the family rub between Morgan and the O'Shaughnessy's comes into play, I'm still unsure of. There's that connection with the O'Shaughnessy's and Calls, right? The marriage. If the idea that somehow, and this is a little bit of metagame there, that Charles Dexter Ward, I'm bringing my spirit back, over and over again through a form of reincarnation. I don't know if I can place that this is what Xavier is, right? If he is the one that's been brought back from the past, or if this is somehow connected to these idols, these effigies that are being made. In a sense, these spirits are brought back and then placed into these devices, for lack of a better term. But it is definitely clear that I need to find out what really has happened with the books. That the books are definitely going to be a key part in understanding a larger swath of what's going on. And it's a definite direction for Alex to go in. Now, to the best of my knowledge, the only person I can approach who may know anything about that is, once again, the PI, to go back and track down Driscoll.
Oh, poor Eddie Driscoll.
Yeah. and hope that he's more cogent at this point, that he won't be afraid of talking with Alex. But that is a definite direction that Alex is going to be going in. I know that for sure. I can just feel that for sure, that the happenstance of the book theft, Armitage, Whately, Smith, all explaining, the importance of this journal, the information it contains, them kind of confirming the, I don't know exactly what title you're using, but I know it's, the Librum de Verimis.
The Mysteries of the Worm.
The Mysteries of the Worm, yeah. So finding out where they are, who has the books in their possession, which is going to mean going to the Gavigan family in some way, shape, or form, going to the auction house, and having a reason outside of my personal vendetta to do this. And there will be that creeping regret of keeping information from Bill.
Poor Bill. Can you imagine? Right.
Where have you been all day, Alex? Well, I was attacked by an interdimensional being.
Again?
Another hard day at the office of the IRS. Yeah.
Well, you've got an easy pass now, because Bill thinks you're in Danvers.
Oh, yeah.
Hospital.
I can imagine the look on his face when I come back from Danvers to the office.
Yeah.
Every time I start to get a little twitchy. You okay? Are you okay?
Are you having an episode?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But I that's where I stand as far as my understanding, both as player and character. Does that sound like I'm in the right ballpark?
Yeah, I think it's coherent, and it's using the facts that you've learned and the interactions that you've had, and you still have a direction forward,
Oh yeah.
things that they're compelled to do.
An interesting sideline is, to kind of try and understand what is happening now with the O'Shaughnessy family. They're given the blow that they have received, not just from me with what happened recently, because I don't know how much of a relationship Mickey and all the family knows, right? It's still a big, huge blank spot for Alex. But in the grand landscape of the Boston crime families, you know,
Yep.
it'll be interesting to kind of try and maybe have Prince look and see how the landscape has changed,
Right.
what the O'Shaughnessy family is doing at this point, at least just to keep tabs on them so that there's no blindsiding from them.
Because they've suffered enough losses that it's either quit
Yeah.
or retaliate in a big way, right? They can't keep just
They
accepting.
can't,
Yeah,
they can't keep ceding ground, right? They only have so much territory they were in control of. They've had a lot of that removed. If they cede any more, it's not just going to be the Morgan that sees them as being weak.
there's the
Other
other
crime
smaller
families in
gangs.
Boston will, move in on the rest of their territory. So for them, it would almost be either, like you say, it's a put up or shut up. Is it going to be an act of desperation, or is it going to be a calculated move?
Right on.
So one of those breaking of the rules that a Black Knight might do would be to point them in the right direction.
That's right. I'll meet you on a park bench in Boston Commons. Slide the envelope across the.
Do unto others as has been done to me.
Yeah.
I will have to find a sword of my own. Maybe that could be the O'Shaughnessy family being run from Bill's office.
That's right. We're working for the Prohibition Bureau. Are you
Yeah.
mad? How did you feel about breaking the figurine?
I mean, it's a tough question. It's for Alex. It is. I am out of my depth. I have the only thing that I know of that could be called a weapon in my possession. Used to defend my. It was clearly demonstrated, in the paper that this is the result of that. Even
Yep.
though at the time I didn't know. I am told that by Xavier. I am told that by Armitage. But from Xavier, it comes as, will you willingly hand it over to me? From Armitage, it is too dangerous to control, And so within character, I mean, that's what it just follows, that this is what Alex would do. If all signs point towards the uncontrollable destruction that would occur, if I cannot have it, then no one else should have it.
Yeah.
So destroying it is the most logical point, logical course of action that Alex would take. Even the moral ground, if he can't wrap his head around the idea of the phylactery, the soul gem, the game concept, as we could talk about now, the imprison, just the idea seems like
Right.
purgatory to him, right? It's this thing is trapped in a limbo. So probably his best act as a white knight is to break it, right? You could look at it from that perspective too, that he's making this choice, that if he is supposed to be making the right choices as the archetype would go, of a force of good, then mercy and you really couldn't say justice, but mercy would be
Mercy,
another, yeah, the most likely reason he would do it. And and I kind of hope that, that whole part of it, I mean, is portrayed well, right? His reluctance to relinquish power.
You've been through a lot.
Yeah. Well, this
I
is
could just point it at the enemy and destroy them all.
boom, baby. Yeah. Because at this point, there's no concept of atomic power, right? So putting two and two together, right? The photos, the physically being in the doctor's office, seeing the carnage involved in what would happen is horrific into of itself, right? That can cause someone to tip over the edge. Can I trust myself with that kind of power? A power, I'm told, that would be wielded against an indiscriminate area of people.
Right.
So for me, I hope that is portrayed out well. The conflict of interest that he has, his feelings about potentially being used as a tool by Xavier, the tug and back and forth between, am I a good person? Am I an evil person?
Yeah. I found it interesting to ask for the strength roll rather than make the assumption that eventually, like banging on the table or whatever, you could.
No. Well, it's funny because that roll was a 97. And so when I saw it, I was like looking at it going, he's not a physically weak guy. So
Right.
What is it that's going on here? And so the way I kind of looked at the role was, but just what happened, he had just lost sanity. He is still trying to come to terms with, so
Fear.
There is still this unconscious reluctance to, by his own hand, be the one to break it. So when he can't do it himself, he has to use a tool to break a tool.
Yeah.
It's still a constant reaching for something else to solve the problem.
Yeah. I liked the metaphor that all became. It's like one of the little gifts that played.
Oh yeah. Well, and it was presented well. It really is. I mean, it was presented very well. I mean, because it was one of those situations like with Driscoll. I'm just going to reach into my bag and pull out this Cthulhu effigy and place it. Yeah, what do you think of this? And people are like, I mean, it's just an idol, I mean, I'm not, knowing what it is, but and
anyone,
then
like from across the ward to be thinking you're holding like a pepper shaker or something like that. What's the big deal?
I don't understand. But it plays into it, right? He's getting an understanding. I still haven't gained a Cthulhu mythos score, right? But there is a tacit understanding that it is somehow attached to this unknown thing.
That now that your circle of acquaintances has expanded, you're in serious danger of accruing some.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure I will be in serious danger of accruing some. It not always a two-edged sword, that one.
Yeah.
Let
me tell you about the render of veils. No, it's okay.
Yes,
tell me where to go. What to do.
Do you really understand the last 5 days what I've been through?
Yeah. Fun. Poor Armitage.
How do you feel about introducing named characters?
Usually in my play I do not. Like, for example, Star Wars. I feel no compunction, but I've been playing Call of Cthulhu for a really long time and have never used these characters.
Okay.
So I thought, you know what? let's use these characters. And that was one of the reasons why, one of many reasons why I wanted to go with 1931. So that, like, rather than when I play in Ubiquity, when we play Leagues of Cthulhu, where we're playing before any of the stories happen.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of flexibility to play with the concepts. And, as Graham Walmsley famously wrote in his, Stealing Cthulhu, it's a great way to kind of build up your improvisational muscles. If you look at an actual Lovecraft story or whoever, right, and then break it down into its constituent parts, what are the constituent parts of this particular horror? What makes this scary? Like, what is the key point? And then what do I want to take from that to be my starting situation, right? So that's what I do normally, right? So all the deep ones are scary for the following reasons. So, okay, I will build a campaign around the threat of the deep ones. I don't use the story about, right? But I take the thing that's scary from it, or the thing that's unsettling, or the thing that's in motion. So this time I thought, well, it'd be kind of interesting if these characters are around, but I would like it to be after many of the stories are done. So, the Dunwich Horror, the horror part of the Dunwich Horror takes place in 1928.
Yeah.
Right. So,
which gives you the ability to use a reference, to frame a good way to set up and frame a reference, right? Without it being last week's headline in a newspaper, the invasion of Innsmouth or anything like that. Yeah.
So some events I'm pushing into the future because I'd like to meet those characters, and some events I'm pushing into the past because I don't.
Which, right. I mean, because unless you're like really trying to recreate the timeline, there's no reason to move a year or two here or there to allow for those adjustments, right?
Right.
I mean, just because the Shadow over Innsmouth takes place at a certain point in the Mythos history doesn't mean you can't push it back a year to give yourself more breathing room, right? Which is a very comfortable thing to do. But when you first mentioned Armitage, like last session, I was like, okay, this is a heavy hitting character who's come up before. So, but there was no description, so I had not yet placed in my mind what Armitage would look like.
Cool.
And then to find out that he is accompanied by a Whately,
one of the undecayed Whateleys.
Yes. That also, as a reader of the fiction, right? When you hear these names, you start to kind of like imagine, okay, how far along is that one? Is this Whately, like, how far along are they?
Which Whately is which?
And how far off the father's family tree is he branched, and even Smith, which if I don't, I mean, Smith is kind of a blank back name, but Ezra, of course, is a known family name, right?
Yeah.
So the Whately was the other one that drew my attention immediately. It was, okay, how entangled are we going to get by having them involved? So what brought you to the decision to use Armitage, other than you would like to see them used from a standpoint of view? And the same thing with Whately.
Kyle is a graduate of Miskatonic.
Yes.
And Spinnaker is a noted Harvard professor, and so where is he most likely to reach out to experts with the kind of story that you you have told. Well, he's older than you are, right? He can remember, different newspaper reports, and he can remember the obvious change in Armitage from before 1928 and after 1920. There's no way that he he deals with what happens in Dunwich
Yeah.
without without some kind of physical changes and that sort of thing. So there's all of that. So it would be really easy for me to make up my own characters,
Hmm.
and that's what I normally do. So I thought, well, let's not let's let the fun challenge of portraying these characters be that they're characters that I've read in Lovecraft's stories, or they are that one line. And the one line for Richard Whately is, of course, the fact that there are two branches of the Whately family.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just a fun thing for me to play with. Which branch is which?
Yeah. How far out on the limb is hopefully he's
So
not too closely related to his dad,
yeah.
or the dad, you could say.
So there's
So
there's all that. Yeah.
the Armitage is a really good way to, make the connection, Spinnaker, Armitage. But why the Whately?
Why the Whately?
Yeah, why the Whately?
Armitage himself, and I mean, over the years I've speculated about what would Armitage do after the events of
Mm-hmm.
the Dunwich Horror. And the new Arkham book follows the same train of thought that I have. Is that there's a lot of big changes are happening here at Miskatonic University. Remember all those moldy old books that you could just find on any shelf and on any reading table? Well, they've all been locked away in the
Yeah.
restricted section. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So, you know, time has passed, and the the idea of who would be motivated to try and learn more about this kind of stuff, and who could Armitage trust, and things like that. So I thought it would be very interesting to introduce someone from the Whately family.
No. Okay. Hmm. So how do you feel now that because I watched a little bit of the Brian and Ivan's. I didn't watch all the way through. I kind of got the feeling as I was getting into it, I was like, there's some kind of conclusion coming here. So I
Oh,
stopped.
session 13?
Yeah, session 13. So I stopped
12, session 12, yeah.
because 14 is 13 or 14 Samuel G.
14 is same old G. So 13 is,
Yeah.
13 has to be yeah, 13 is the conclusion. Yeah.
So now that we've reached this point with Alex,
Right.
which brings us to our session 7 that we've had. And you've reached a point which I believe is similar with Brian and Ivan.
Yep.
How do you think the trajectory will change now that the characters have hit this kind of a point in the game?
Well, I have some insight into that because that session 13, which was just released last week, was actually recorded in the last week of January.
Oh my God, really?
So there have been other sessions. There are more sessions than these. Yes.
Okay, so how many sessions have you had total now?
I have no idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you have
So
in other words, you have your own form of a pile of shame that miniature painters have. You have a series of videos that are waiting in queue to kind of.
Well, I haven't missed too many weeks. I
Okay,
think that, I think
because January of this year sounds like an awful long time, you know.
but yeah, we played a few before I released the first one, so we were out of sync from I wanted to have a number to draw from,
Oh yeah, no, no,
and that was back when I was having the rendering problems, and so I could edit everything and render almost to the end, and then it would crash.
yeah,
So there was delays beyond what I planned. So I started out with a pretty healthy backlog anyway, and then there were a couple of times where I just didn't release stuff.
okay,
Yeah. So this week, Craig Shipman from Third Floor Wars, his first comes out also,
nice.
and yeah. So I'm going to slow down the release of the Brian and Ivan ones
Mm-hmm.
so that we see more of the ones that are still in the pre-resolution phase that
Yeah,
we did today, that
yeah.
kind of thing.
Well, and that makes sense. You don't want to get you don't neither. I mean, from my perspective, I don't want to get so far ahead that it's hard to have the opportunity to cross over, right?
Right.
I don't want to. And if it even if it becomes something where we're saying, hey, look, in like we were talking about earlier with the same old G, is that hey, there is a point maybe in a couple of weeks or whatever, or a couple more sessions where it's likely because of what you're doing and what he's doing that your paths are going to cross,
Right.
and not to uh railroad the story, but it to make the opportunity to have something like that happen. I mean, even if it does have to be something that is coordinated, I would definitely not be opposed to.
Right.
I think
The
for
way it worked.
Ivan and Brian, it would be a little bit more challenging for someone like me because of the time zones we're in.
Yeah. The way it worked originally is that Ivan in play realized he needed a photographer. And so, we recruited for players, you know,
Yeah.
and there is an opening for someone to play a photographer. And then they realized we need someone who understands antiques and all this
Mhm.
history stuff that's cropping up. And
Budding up
so then
again.
we recruited for an antiquarian, and so that kind of stuff. So um,
I saw that so the gangster is an interesting choice.
yeah.
Was that on Samuel G's behalf, or did you propose the role?
At the point where he and I were talking about him playing, there was no particular drive for there to be a thing like I just described, right?
Yeah.
So I looked at the condition of Boston and said, well, we've got room for um, like a private detective, we've got room for an academic, and we've
Mhm.
got room for a gangster. And so he had the pick of that kind of
Oh, nice.
occupation. And then, much like you did, right? We've got, we can look at it from the point of view of the dilettante. We can look at it from the point of view of the Prohibition agent. Which would you like? And then we worked from there.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and
How much of that do you feel has been pushed to the side? The Treasury agent part of it. Do you feel like the investigation into what's been happening uh, has kind of like superseded portraying the Treasury agent?
Morgan has presented himself as a mob boss
Okay.
as far as the Prohibition Bureau is concerned. That that you don't necessarily agree is something that really only you only you and Kyle know
Yeah.
at this point. So any investigation that you've been undertaking in to bring down Morgan is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Elliot and us versus you got to go there and you got to bring down Capone. Right? You got to
Because
send a strong message. So
I know sometimes in when things go on long enough that you might a group or players may lose track of why were we doing this?
who they are, yeah. Nobody
What are
ever
we doing?
goes to work.
Yeah. And that has kind of been, and I don't want to say I've been trying to play it as simulation or realistic, but definitely with a certain amount of verisimilitude that it's believable that I haven't just shoved the concept of Alex, the Treasury agent, to the side to be a Call of Cthulhu investigator without there being some reason to be involved or have a continuing reason to be
Right.
involved.
So
So
I hope the message sent about about being committed to a mental hospital uh, demonstrates that there are consequences
oh yeah.
for things. So
Oh,
yeah, if he never goes to work or there are no reports filed or whatever, then there'll be some pushback from the government.
yeah. Well, and that has been something that, we have done so far is because we've really been hitting these day by day
Right.
events is that, I even I myself as the player realize if I want it to be plausible, I can't just phone it in, literally call Bill and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, because that's only going to be plausible for so long from a work life standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Why are you never in the office? Well, I'm always out in the field. Yeah, but
Doing
uh,
what?
yeah, doing what? You're supposed to, come back into the office. You're employed by the government.
Yeah.
Uh, One of the things that I've kind of done outside as far as like playing the game is to go in and look at Delta Green,
Sure.
because that was one of the, like, how far back in the timeline that those guys developed did the idea of Delta Green start to form within the continuing Cthulhu mythos.
Right.
And so as a player, I'm it's interesting for me to look at Alex and see him try to find a place to belong.
Right.
Knowing that he is a government employee, he's interested in going to the Bureau, which, by the way, has not fallen by the wayside, because I was told there would be some kind of reward. I remember that I would benefit from what was going on. Uh, and having played Delta Green, you mentioned the idea of going to the Danvers, right? That is very much a concept present within that game. The how do you deal with and reconcile the stress of what really is going on in the game, to be committed to take it out on your family, to have difficulty in that work-life balance when you realize that there is the render of time and space out there uh, trying to do things, right?
Yeah.
Has
Yeah.
there ever been in your mind a way to, in a Pendragon form, try to get to that point where the timelines begin to cross between Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green, or some of these more modern takes on Call of Cthulhu?
I regularly play what I used to call legacy games, but I now call them generation games. But I can't seem to mention one of my labels without mentioning the other, so I'm clearly not satisfied with either.
Yeah.
But the idea is that we play in this time period most of the time, whatever this one is. But sometimes we play in another time period, and the investigator characters are related in some
Mm.
way. So, uh, playing in the 1930s, and you set up a foundation for the investigation of occult shenanigans,
Yeah.
and then we play that same organization in the 1970s or the 1990s or whenever, that
Mm.
kind of thing, and just so the campaigns have a greater feel of scope, that the timelessness of the
Yeah.
threat, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Even
That
if
plays it.
the investigations never cross over,
Yeah.
that there is a sense of the future and whatnot. But in terms of Delta Green as an organization, like with that name, I've not used it in Call of Cthulhu,
Yeah.
but the Shadow over Innsmouth has a very distinct ending. It's not something that, and then they sailed away and never thought about it again.
Yeah.
So that it has to be acknowledged in some way, and whether you go the Delta Green route or whether you go through some other
Yeah.
route, I mean, it's pretty fertile ground for exploration.
And Delta Green is really the only one I can think of that kind of like comes at that head on, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
really well. They do
yeah,
it
when you
really
look
well.
at the timeline they lay out and the two approaches taken in Delta Green, government, non-government organizations and the way they interact with each other. Like you say, the Shadow of Innsmouth has this defined ending. How can you ignore it?
Yeah.
And it's such a fruitful void to leap into. How would this play out? So I didn't know if there was like if
Yeah, because I'm willing to bring in Professor Armitage and yeah, so yeah, it's a I'm not going in any particular direction. I'm moving
yeah,
from the inciting incidents.
yeah,
So um, I don't have a plan for Alex to join Delta Green, get married, and have 57 children, and that kind of stuff. But I have to I have to follow where the world
yeah.
is building.
Well, and I hope the direction that he's been pointed in, his when we look at his let's look at it from a career path trajectory, right? He still wants to be an investigator of some sort. He wants to be involved in law enforcement of some sort. So when he got moves from pointing at the Treasury to saying, I need a department with probably more resources and a little bit more scope, pointing at the Bureau, right? He is looking for an organization as he learns more. Where can he not necessarily operate in the open as an agent on the field? This is why I'm here to investigate, but a group of people that he can talk to and
Right.
communicate with, right? So did you at some point did you kind of get that feeling that that's where Alex is going, or did I make it overt enough that he is looking for an organization to belong to that kind of points in
Sure.
that direction? Okay.
Yeah, as soon as there's an opportunity represented by the Prohibition Bureau, but then there's this completely other experience, and so there's a quick pivot to this investigation as a stepping stone to my joining the Bureau, which is a national mandate of a different type of investigation, and you can see. So I think
Okay.
it's there.
Good.
It's a question of, will he be sane enough?
I'm not doing too bad so far. I mean, 7 sessions in, and technically I'm only down by 3 points, even though 40 points is not the best place to start. To let you know, I did purposely move the stats so that I did not start with a higher sanity score.
High sanity.
Yeah, I did not, like, I didn't optimize for that, if there's any way to really put it that way, because I didn't want it to be that way. I wanted there to be someplace in the middle ground as far as sanity goes. So, and it hasn't turned out too bad. Of course, I haven't, you
haven't turned a corner and found a Shoggoth or whatever.
Yeah. There is that. I've seen horrifying and terrifying things, but it's not been the full-blown night gaunt, full-blown here's a ghoul, that kind of event. Yeah. And I haven't truly learned anything concrete about the mythos, which is another contributing factor to me remaining as sane as he is.
Right. 99
sometimes
Cthulhu mythos.
Yeah, sometimes blissful ignorance is better.
Yeah. As he retires and opens a pizza shop in Des Moines.
Yes. As part of my witness protection program.
That's right.
We can't just tuck him away in a corner. He knows too much.
Exactly. All right. Well, congratulations on completing what under normal play would be a first investigation, but in the continuous flow of this campaign is just a point where it makes sense to process some data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not like it comes to a screeching halt. So there's still plenty to continue on with.
You've got Morgan's appointment with your father. You have your own appointment with your father scheduled for sometime next week.
Yeah, well, Friday, because it was the Friday the 13th.
Following Friday. Yeah.
And the following Friday was the Dad, we got to have a talk.
Yeah. I'll put you in pen.
Yeah, you better.
You won't be able to erase your name this time.
No excuses.
All right.
Cool. Fantastic. Again, I appreciate you not just running for me, but all the work that you've put into running these various sessions. It's been neat to look at, as you look back and see the whole thing kind of come together.
And it's going to get a whole lot weirder as all four branches become exposed, as they say.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for playing.
You're welcome. Thank you for running in. Bye-bye.